How are we all feeling after that one? 0-0 on the South Coast. I was there. Great atmosphere, let's be honest. Great away support. It was buzzing to be part of it. It's just a shame that the game didn't live up to the hype, obviously, beforehand. And listen, we come in with an unchanged side. I thought that was relatively interesting. I've discussed on previous videos regarding Zuma and Craig Dawson, and we'll get a little bit into Craig Dawson in this video. But I also did say on the preview that I thought David Moyes may stick with the same 11. Now, that proved to be costly's not the right word because at the end of the day, we got a draw, we got a clean sheet. But certainly, I feel the energy was a big part in this performance, particularly in that second half. First half was scrappy. Southampton, they pressed us. They were obviously going to press us, but they weren't. They weren't. What's the word? They weren't too over the top. Basically, I said it in a preview as well. I said that Southampton are a team that I think are trying to adapt a little bit in terms of playing on the front foot, getting bodies forward, and overloading wide areas. Now, anyone that watched it on telly at the game, left-hand side was a big part of Southampton's build-up play with Perot and Gineppo, and they targeted it, and they forced West Ham into a few issues in terms of dealing with that side. I think Moyes obviously set up, and it was interesting from a tactical point of view, the 4-2-3-1. But as opposed to playing 4-4-2 out of possession, Moyes went with the attacking midfield three pressing. And obviously, at times, it meant that Bowen wasn't necessarily sitting back alongside Soufal. If Southampton could beat that press, then they would get opportunities. And that did happen possibly for the first 20 minutes or so. Nothing against Jared Bowen, by the way. I thought he was absolutely excellent yesterday. And on review of the match, I probably would give him the man of the match for us. In any case, they created, it was problematic. And I think one of the problems for me, and I think this will be a problem throughout the season, and something that David Moyes has to address. And I think a lot of people are of the same opinion. We've just played two sides with two pressing styles, one from the midfield and one from the front. Now, in particular, in this game, we never really wanted to play through their press. Had we played through their press into our attacking midfield three, I think spaces would have appeared. And obviously, Southampton, the minute they lost the ball, and we weren't sloppy in transition. We were at times in that second half, but I think most of all, I think we were too slow and we were too conservative, and that's not our game. And I think teams as well were coming up against the likes of Southampton and Palace, and the dynamic of the teams we're now playing has changed. Because last season, we were happy to give other teams the ball. We're fantastic on transitions, counters, overloads in the box, etc. We all know it. And you could see the pattern of play from a mile away as a West Ham fan. Now we're coming up against these sides, and they're happy to give us the ball. And they're almost doing enough without the ball as an opposition to force us into issues. Now, that's something that we have to adapt to. And one of the ways we have to adapt to that is by our centre-backs being a little bit more progressive or giving it to Declan Rice and trying to play through those lines. Now, we did create a little bit. A lot of it was through that left-hand side. The interesting thing for me to see, particularly from Southampton, was they doubled up with Gineppo and Perot, not only offensively, but defensively. And so it was difficult for Soufal to get in the game. I didn't feel that we pushed our fullbacks higher and wide enough as we have done in previous games against low-block teams. That's the way that we've been able to unlock them. Everything was quite narrow. It became very easy for Southampton. You could argue the switch was maybe on, but again, a risky ball, and particularly with his side and a David Moyes side, giving away possession, which is ironic because we gave it away a fair few times yesterday, isn't exactly what he wanted to do. So I think we needed to come up with a different game plan. We certainly needed to play with a little bit more tempo in the second half, stretch them a little bit, push the fullbacks high, and press them and show a little bit more energy. Now, we had a few chances. Soucek in particular from the corner in the second half. He should have done better, in all honesty. I think he looked a little bit off yesterday as well, some of his passing. And that was really disappointing for me. I think a lot of misplaced passes in that game, in the transitions, but in particular with Soucek, sometimes when there wasn't even really pressure on him. And I know Southampton were trying to squeeze a little bit, and I know that's difficult to deal with at times, but he had plenty of time to make the right pass, and it was just going all out of play. And obviously, Craig Dawson, very, very similar. So maybe we could have got something from that. Overall, the tempo improved massively. I think we started to create a little bit more. We created more, and I think we almost reverted to the way that we can play to a degree, because I think Soufal was getting quite high. He was getting the deliveries into the box. I'll argue that some of the deliveries weren't spot on, But I'd also argue that by the time that we got it out to the wide areas, Southampton were already set, and it was difficult for us to even get the knockdowns and the knock-ons. Now, we'll talk about Ben Rama actually a little bit, because I didn't think he had a great game yesterday. I thought maybe spells that he threatened. There was certainly a pass that he nearly played through to Jarrod Bowen or Soufal that would have been really promising. But again, in the second half, and what we've seen from him this season, you want him to be getting in the box, getting the overload. And it's not necessarily that Ben Rama is going to go and win an aerial duel. I don't think anyone expects that, but certainly to be in the box, proactively around, trying to pick up loose touches, maybe force Southampton into an issue. Instead, what he was doing, and I think this is where he's not as effective for West Ham, is when he's coming to the wide areas and picking the ball up. For me, Ben Rama's better when he's moving in behind. And to be fair, in fairness to him, it is difficult to play against the Southampton side that were compact. But I just felt that he didn't really offer enough, maybe going forward, which is harsh because I think there was probably a fair few yesterday that didn't really do that. Now, Vlasic comes on and really, really impressed, super impressed with his performance. I think his work rate and his pressures were brilliant. I think physically, he offers a little bit more than Ben Rama. I think there'll be games for Ben Rama where he'll absolutely thrive, particularly you look at Leeds in a few weeks' time with the amount of space. But in games where, for me, teams are pressing up against our attacking midfielders, they did it to, and Antonio had a poor game yesterday, and Salisu was all over him. And he clearly lacked energy as well, but he was becoming frustrated. But when you come up against teams like this, and it could happen a fair bit this season, when they're pressing, you've either A, got to be dynamic enough to go and beat them, or B, be physical enough. Now, Vlasic comes on and he's using his body incredibly well. He's making runs in beyond. He's creating space. He's carrying the ball. He's doing everything that West Ham needed to do proactively, because you're playing against the side that they're not moving out of their shape. You've got to force the issue. Now, I was happy to see Dek and Soucek pushing further up second half. We played obviously a higher line. We had a lot of the ball. It did leave us vulnerable to the counter. We'll talk about that, because from the 80th minute on, Southampton created definitely the better chances. But we did begin to recycle a little bit quicker. We looked to create a bit more. And Vlasic's addition, just the work rate of working off Mikel Antonio, introducing Pablo Fornals into play. And he even cut it back for Mickey. And obviously the Southampton defence got it away. I think the only frustrating thing for me is the lack of energy as well from Antonio. You know, he's knackered. And I think that's the thing as well. On review of it, there's a lot of players out there that were leggy, particularly towards the end. I think Soucek, international football, Soufal, albeit you see his energy levels, and Soucek's, to be fair to them, are incredible. I thought Dek maybe got leggy for the last 10, but I thought it was absolutely superb. And let's be clear here, he kept us in the game. He gave us the point in the end. So, and Antonio started, for me, when you watch it back, blowing 60 minutes. And when he can't, listen, he's a physical presence and he'll try and hold the ball up, but he wasn't pressing as hard. He wasn't holding the ball up and turning and taking on players. It's exactly what West Ham needed in that situation. And so it became a poor afternoon. Misplaced passes, poor touches. Fatigue plays a part with Mickey. I think when Mickey gets tired, his whole game seems to drop a fair bit. So it was disappointing from that aspect. I still felt that we could have nicked something. And then, of course, you get to the 75th, 80th minute, and Southampton, the game becomes stretched. Look, we're chasing it, which is fair enough, obviously. And the spaces appear. And that's what Southampton set up for. I'm not saying they were negative. They were disciplined in getting back. They were conservative on certain sides. They doubled up where they felt West Ham could hurt them. And Salisu essentially did a little bit of a job on Mikel Antonio, which you don't really expect a centre-back, even in this league, particularly at Southampton, to go and cause him problems. So they had the space. They ran into it. They brought their substitute on. Armstrong goes off injured. And again, Craig Dawson, there were bits in the first half where he made important blocks. So Djenepo's shot, it's fair enough. He won some aerial duels as well. Key aerial duels, actually. But this is where we run into problems. His aggressiveness and the lack of recovery pace and those things, when you're trying to play a high line and you're trying to force the issue a little bit, that's problematic because, again, you leave yourself susceptible anyway. But when you can't make it up and you misread the situation, it could have cost West Ham. It could have cost West Ham. It was only through the recovery pace of the likes of Soufal obviously got back. Declan Rice got back as well a number of times to cover for him. It's frustrating. And other teams will punish us more for that. And you take that out of it. And I tried to look at it in a balanced perspective. The passing wasn't great from a lot of players yesterday, but Craig Dawson a number of times gave possession away needlessly, and you're giving the opposition opportunities that they don't need. Now, if like we say, 75th, 80th minute, you're chasing the game and they win the ball from a corner, that's slightly different. Okay, but when you're trying to play out and you're misplacing the passes or you're overcooking it and you're just giving it back needlessly, that is an issue. Is Zuma a better passer than Dawson? Probably, although Zuma's best quality isn't necessarily passing, but what it is athleticism, it's recovery pace, it's strength. And I think we need to now probably slowly move, if not immediately move, to having Zuma in this side alongside Angelo Ogbonna, developing that partnership. Because if this happens in future games, it's not just defensively. It isn't. I think Dawson's fantastic in terms of aerial duels. I'm frustrated with him letting runners run off him. That's a problem that's come into his game. Everything for me with Dawson has to be in front of him. And if it's in front of him and we're in shape, he'll deal with it. But Zuma is clearly an upgrade. He's clearly more athletic. He allows us not only to be better defensively and deal with those counters, he allows us to push up and he gives us the impetus to get the fullbacks on early doors. So I think it's not just looking at Zuma and Dawson and saying, well, it's just a defensive. It's not. It's the dynamic of the team. So that has to change for me. I thought we were quite fortunate in the end probably to get away with it. I think draw's a fair result. Probably wasn't enough quality. There definitely wasn't enough quality from us to get a result yesterday. Having said that, I don't think Southampton necessarily had a gluttonous amount of chances throughout the entirety of the game, and we dealt with it okay in the first half. So 0-0 is probably fair. We should be beating Southampton, absolutely. But this is a problem I think we're going to come across this season. So it's up to David Moyes, the players, to adapt to it. But there are positives. Jared Bowen had a fantastic performance, looked really good in central areas. He'll love games like that. He'll thrive against Leeds, people pressing up against him where he can use his pace and his directness and getting in beyond and carrying the ball. That's where he'll thrive. And of course, Vlasic coming on, looks like he can adapt to this league relatively quickly. Now we'll go on to talk a little bit about the false nine scenario. I'll save it for the preview for Manchester United. That is upon us. Obviously, Mickey got sent off. Silly on the first, reckless on the second. I haven't really got anything else to say about that. Frustrating, disappointed. He's absolutely knackered and his head's gone. So it is what it is. We're not going to try and dwell on it too long. Thank God it's only one game and not three, and it's not an injury. So we'll probably see him on Thursday against Dinamo Zagreb. But that's really all I can conclude in a 0-0 game. Probably giving it a fair bit more service than it deserves. But from my perspective, I think quality against these defensive sides has to improve. We've got to be quicker and more effective in the transition. And on that point of transitioning, we are not, when we're doing it, because of the lack of energy in this game, Mickey's not getting alongside Ben Rama and Bowen. And so all of Bowen's fantastic work, where obviously he hasn't got an international break, is not being supplemented. So I think that can be rectified, but it will be a completely different type of game for me and game plan when we play Manchester United. But thanks so much for listening to me go on about West Ham. Let me know in the comment section what you think about that game. What do you think the implications are for the rest of the season? We are still unbeaten if we're sitting here looking at positives. We did get a clean sheet, although probably quite fortunate in the end. Drop a like on the review if you did like it. I will see you lot on, I think we'll look at Wednesday for an All Things West Ham. We didn't do it last week because we couldn't get the lads along. So we'll try and get that in. Do the preview for Dinamo Zagreb. I'll get that out Wednesday morning. So Euro Expert will be coming on. We'll be pre-recording that on Tuesday. And then you'll get everything else thereafter for Manchester United at home. Take care, everybody. And try and enjoy the rest of your day. And I'll see you all very